Clashes have reportedly broken out in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo between its military and M23 rebels. The conflict comes a day after a bilateral agreement to de-escalate diplomatic tensions over the rebellion. The M23, which Kinshasa accuses Kigali of supporting, began a major offensive in the eastern borderlands at the end of March. African Affairs analyst and Channel Africa producer, colleague Nixon Katembo joins us now in the studio to talk about this. So, yeah, we've spoken about what a tenuous situation this is in terms of the security situation, Nixon, but also, I mean, there are people who are already expressing doubts about the, should I call it, ceasefire, quote-unquote, agreement. Are you surprised by reports that there already are attacks?
I'm not surprised at all. And you recall that the last time I was here, I said that this is likely what is going to happen. And to my confirmation of what I said, exactly what happened. Because if you look at the talks that have been happening going towards this meeting, the discussion that President Paul Kagame had with the Rwandan Broadcasting Corporation, and then the subsequent kind of rebuttal from President Felix Tshisekedi having an interview with the Financial Times to say that the DRC is likely to go to war with Rwanda, even when they were in Rwanda for the discussion. So this is a déjà vu. It has been used before. If you follow the history of the Great Lakes region and East Africa, you'd recall that with the NRA war in Uganda in 1986, it's the same playbook that is being read from here. And
Let's
it's not
take
surprising.
us there and take us back there in the similarities and why peace would fail to hold now, even albeit a temporary peace, because the African Union and the United Nations have called for calm. They have strenuously called for diplomatic efforts to take the lead in the situation. Just show us the similarities to what happened then and why history is repeating itself. Well,
if you look at the war that happened between Uganda at the time with the rebellion under the National Resistance Army led by Museveni, of which Kagame was a cohort, including the likes of Fred Rwigema and many others, they were having a discussion in Nairobi with then President Tito Okello of Uganda. At the same time, the war was continuing in Uganda. The same playbook was read from during the RPF war with the Habyarimana's government in Rwanda. As the discussions were happening in Arusha, at the same time the war was happening in Rwanda. The same have happened inside the DRC, the same system being used by the very same history being learned from by the very same people who have mastered this idea of deceit, diplomatic deceit, so to speak. And it is not surprising for me this happening because the doublespeak that comes from either governments is quite telling. On the other hand, you find radio or newspaper organizations by Kigali government, such as the New Times or Radio Igihe in Rwanda, saying that the boy is going to pay up for the price of, you know, closing up the airspace of the DRC. In the meantime, who is the boy that is being talking about? Is the president of the DRC. These are the kind of language that
you raise a very important aspect, and I think we generally, as a media, have not dealt with it. Not only the misinformation but disinformation campaign, but I don't know what the technical word is for it. The kind of toxic campaigns that are ran during this. I'm thinking here of, and it really saddens me, the pessimism that you express, because it's born out of realism, I understand, but while if we look at how cruel and brutal the campaigns have been by not only rebel leaders. You talk about Joseph Kony, Laurent Nkunda, you spoke about early on. I'm just even tracing the wars in Liberia. So what seems to be the problem? Is it engineered to turn the peoples of the communities in these countries not only against each other, but to believe that there can be no lasting peace in the Great Lakes region?
Well, there is a sense of ethnic mobilization that I have spoken of before, which then become a political currency for some political leaders within the region. You talk about the current M23, for example, which is saying that they are fighting for ethnic Rwandophone who are inside the DRC. But you have numerous Rwandophone-speaking populations inside the DRC who have gone against what the M23 stand for. Interestingly, what is happening now is the killing of a civilian who were purportedly Rwandophone speakers, and just because they are Hutus in a territory like Ruchuru, just last week, about 46 civilians were killed by M23 rebels. Who account for that? And that has happened. And again, I keep on going back to history, that if you look at it, in the case of Uganda, in the Luwero area, where rebels could kill the civilian population and blame it on Milton Obote's government. The same happened in Rwanda, where civilians are killed and then they are blamed on the government. The same history keeps on repeating itself. And unfortunately, we cannot escape from going back in understanding, dissecting how the history have played out in this current conflict. And it has to be told for what it is, and particularly for some of us who come from the region and who understand it very well.
Is it the failure of the region? Is it the failure of the international community, given the fact that we are a party signatory to regional, national, and international statutes, for instance, that speak out against some of these things?
So I'm sorry, just forget about the international community for the case of the DRC, because how long is the UN there? You're talking about over 20 years.
I'm just talking as a region, as a unit on the continent. I know some of these issues are couched under ideological differences, but as you say, they are largely, based on ethno-divisions, or should I say, inciting ethno-divisions as well?
Basically, at the moment, they are not about ethno-division, if you want to look at it in that way, because these are wars of resources, these are wars of economic dispossession, these are wars of making sure that the resources of the DRC are taken out of that country. These are wars of political hegemony by certain leaders within the region. And it has to be told as such. Unfortunately, when we talk about the issues within a region, we tend to gravitate around one issue, which is about ethnicity, whereas ethnicity
yes, I mean,
is
Nixon,
used
as I said,
as
they're
a
couched
currency.
as such. They're couched as such. So let's talk about the way forward. We'll still keep on coming back to this point, because I think a solution needs to be in the offing. I think somebody who's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who's been reporting about, as you know, the brutality, the campaign that's been run for years, and including also external international interference that we cannot allow to continue. So how do we bring an end to this? What is the role of the African Union, the United Nations, as you said, and I know that they've been there for years, and in fact, they've also been accused of being complicit in the rape, torture, and killings of some of these communities. But what needs to give now? Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, what would it take to bring them to the table and ask them to negotiate in good faith and in all honesty and transparency?
Unfortunately, what is happening in the DRC, you recall that they were meeting between the presidents in Nairobi. These are solutions based on regional efforts. And I have always this analogy that you can not have hyenas, discussing the issue of an antelope. That's the basic case that is here in the case of the region. Unfortunately for the DRC, and I don't know who drives the diplomacy of that country, you would recall that DRC is a member of SADC. And within the SADC protocol, there is a statute which says that an attack to one is an attack to all SADC members. I would assume that President Tshisekedi would run to SADC, cooperate, have a greater relation with countries like South Africa, which has been a guarantor of peace in the DRC before, and said that, look, I'm a SADC member, I have been aggressed, please, can we deal with these issues?
This is the same President Tshisekedi who went from SADC and joined the Eastern Africa bloc.
Certainly, that is the problem. And if he is facing this, because he has gone back to what in my knowledge, I call hyenas.
Nixon, I'm
and
sorry.
let him get eaten for what it is, because you'd recall even fighting the M23 in 2013, it was by the effort of SADC.
Yeah. Nixon, it's so unfortunate. Our time always gets truncated, unfortunately, out of necessity. So, but we will have you back again. Thanks again for that, Nixon Katembo, my colleague there from Channel Africa. Young generations on the African continent have been urged to learn the Kiswahili language. Leaders on the continent say Kiswahili has been cherished as a liberating language. So it's spoken by at least 200 million people worldwide. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has declared the 7th of July as World Kiswahili Language Day. Several African countries use Kiswahili, and it has also been adopted as an official working language by the African Union, Pan-African Parliament and SADC.